Okay. So the APM Performance Indicator is, we are counting the unique users that view two pages. One view is logging and the other is metrics. I can actually show you the page. It's really simple. It's simple, but it has some, some caveats. So basically, I'm looking for users that go and hit this page, but like the requirement is that this page will not be empty, because users might like accidentally hit on metrics, and most of the time this page will come back with no results, which means that they did not set up anything, they did not set up their monitoring system, and I don't care. But because it's right there, I expect like many users go and click on metrics. And the second one is logging, and the requirement is the same. Okay, let's make sure we are coming back with some sort of a result, like something here. I want to see something. And what I'm doing, I'm actually counting those two metrics separately and then aggregate. Okay, because I mean, I know there are some users that go like for both pages, and I guess that we might accidentally count them twice, or maybe we can't count them only once. That's fine. I mean, I understand that we might miss something, but basically I'm taking this metric and the second metric and I try to aggregate them. The second indicator that really interests me is just the total page view, okay? I have to say that this was like the indicator that I wanted to measure in the first place, but since we user-fied our performance indicator and we want to count users, then we change it to be like the unique users that view both logging and metrics. So basically, like this metric is something that I really want to measure. And this metric is a metric that I'm being measured by the organization, okay? Like the users. Now, I've been tracking that with Snowplow. Now, I understand that like there is some, like the way we are counting unique users is by like the session ID. And from what I understand, we can generate maybe like a single user can generate multiple session IDs. So this is something that I guess we need to refine, and maybe we need to better understand how we can filter this. But this is, I understand that. But for now, I really want to understand, like after I'm giving you this like overview, I really want to understand if we have some sort of a workaround to track this using usage ping, because with Snowplow I can basically do everything that I want. I tell my engineers what to instrument, I know where to go, I know how to create dashboards, I created like different dashboards, and it's great. With usage ping, it's not the same. And for me, I'm having a hard time to understand like what's the differences, like what can I instrument or what can I ask my engineers to instrument, and what is basically impossible to do. So those are like the 2 points that I want to address in this meeting, if that's okay.
Hey, Dev, let me walk over the Snowplow issue and why I think there's a little bit more that we need to understand about that. If you don't mind, I can share screen and walk you through some things that I'm currently doing to help kind of bring light to what my concerns are. And then after that, then Jerome can dive into what Redis can do and how we can think of it from that lens. I'm going to go ahead and share screen. And Dev, I'm going to walk through. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, do you mind sharing the agenda doc again, Dev?
Sure.
Thank you.
Can you see my screen?
Just a second, I'm just, yeah.
Sorry, could you share what you see on my screen? Sorry, my Zoom isn't showing me which screen I'm sharing right now. Is it, do you see the Gmail?
You can see the Gmail, yeah.
Okay, awesome.
I shared it, by the way, I shared it on Slack, on Zoom.
Thank you. So if I click edit here, what I see here is that you're using the user session domain ID. What I did with this ID is I looked up, so I'm going to leave the screen here in the DBT docs. I looked up, and I'll just duplicate this to show how I did it again. So what I did was I first took this ID and I looked into the DBT docs to see what tables have this. And one of the tables that I found that had this was this table here, Snowplow page views. And what I was trying to see is how is this field defined? So when I look at this one, where is this actually coming from? So this actually is represented by the Snowplow value of domain user ID. So when I go to the Snowplow documentation and I look for the domain user ID, this is the original field that it comes in. We at GitLab have, aliased it to this user, to this column name, and therefore that's the one that's showing up here. Do we all agree there so far? So that we're really just using this value here. Yep. So this is done by cookie tracking. And so let me give you an example of what this data set looks like. So yesterday, I'm doing this other experiment where I'm trying to show web direct purchases. But what I did was I did a select distinct count of each of these user fields from this raw data set, and I looked up my own IP address. So based on my own IP address, the maximum number of people who would have ever visited a GitLab.com website should be 3. Myself, my husband, and my brother. In this household, there's only myself and my husband. My brother comes to visit me. No one else comes to my house. I go to other people's houses, that helps. And so with that information, before I began the exercise that I was doing last night, where I'm basically trying to do trial signups and buy data, buying a plan to show what that data would look like coming through in Snowplow, I found that when I ran this query, which is simply a select distinct count of all the user IDs that I could have on this IP address, I found that for the user ID field, which is this first field, we get no value. That makes sense because eventually we'll want to put our GitLab handles in there, and then that would be the distinct user ID field there. The domain user ID, this is the one that you're looking at, that actually counted me as 17. And then when I did the trial data, and by the time I did the buy data, I was actually counted as 18 people, when in reality, I'm 3 people. If you use the other fields, they do have more more statistics, so you can start to see where the numbers really start to blow up. And that's kind of what I'm trying to point to, that technically the maximum number that this IP address should report is roughly 3 people, but we're showing at least 17 or 18 people. And this is what I meant about the multiple counts, because it's at a cookie level. And the other thing to know about me is I don't always use my own IP address. I might use a VPN, in which case I could be counted as someone else as well. And that's where the complexity comes with looking at Snowplow data to get that unique user count.
Okay. So is there a way for us to track like unique user ID, like unique users?
Yeah, so that's exactly what this user ID field is. Do you see how it says the unique ID set by the business? So in most companies, what they do is they set it to an email address. So when that person sends the data, we either get an email address, or we could actually pass in the GitLab handle and then get that GitLab handle information. So that's normally how other companies do it. And this is accepted in the field. At this time, this is what Jerome mentioned. We are waiting on legal before we can really start to implement that. But we do need to get here in order to really track a unique user. Okay.
So basically, I need in my query, I need to replace the domain user ID or the domain session ID with the user ID.
So right now, using this, I think you're using, you're using the domain user ID.
Yeah.
And so that is, this is the best value we do have. So if you look across the numbers, this is 0. So we can't use this field. And the lowest number would be this number. But this is at a cookie level. It's not at a user level. So we might have multiple cookies.
Yeah, totally. Again, totally understand that. Totally understand the limitation that we have.
And that if we could invest more resources and clean up the Snowplow data, we could eventually dedupe the cookies as well, but it would take a lot of resources to do that. And that's why in the meantime, what we're asking is to refocus and find another metric, or whether or not we can use Redis to do this exercise.
Yeah, originally I wanted to track a different metrics. I was like kind of forced by the product leadership to change this to be like to count users. I wanted to count like page views, because honestly, obviously we are all into adoption. It makes sense, but first I want to see if I'm getting like a lot of views, because like for me, if you're looking more and more, I don't care if you're one user and you're looking at this dashboard over and over again, it means that it works for you. It means that you see value. So for me, this was like the most tracked. This was like my performance indicator until last week, where they told me, okay, you need to change it to user. So okay, I'll use like the user, like this ID that is based on cookie, which is the closest one that we have like for that. But like that's what we have basically. And again, if there are like workaround, great. If not, I guess we need to use it for now.
And Dev, I think you bring up a great point. I think at the end, we do want to collect a lot more metrics. We should be counting the total number of page views. We should be counting the total number of users so that we can get to an average page view per user. Those type of metrics. I think there are a lot more metrics we'll have to collect over time at this company. So I would say I see both of those metrics as valuable. I think right now we are trying to make sure that whatever products we have, we are understanding the user in mind. And I think that's why we're using the MAL metrics to go through that. But let me turn it over to Jerome and he can talk about that Redis potential that you could use.
Thanks, Kat. Dov, sorry, can you reshare that document? I don't think I have the permissions to open it.
Oh, sorry. All right.
I'm also having access denied.
And then I'll be able to add some of the links in there as well.
So when you said share, you just mean like open it up for? Why is it
just
not
the permissions?
The permissions. Okay.
So I think first to address what Kat was saying about the domain user ID, that is on a cookie level. And I'd say it's not really surprising because cookies get assigned, especially if you are using an incognito browser. Every time you close that off and open up a new one, you get a new cookie. Therefore, you're assigned a new domain session ID. So that's not going to match the same as your user ID, which is usually generated from the database in GitLab, right? Where you can't just generate a new one unless you actually sign up again. So the sessions are always going to be overcounted in comparison to the users. Eventually, we will roll out user ID tracking. Right now, legal is going through our privacy policy and putting updates to it. And then once that privacy policy is in place, then we can also get a little bit of feedback from the community on the product usage data section. And then we can go about doing the full rollout with marketing, comms, and product, all moving this forward so that we can eventually get user ID and group IDs on each of this snowplow events. The timing on that, though, is to be determined right now. So I think we are in a little bit of a holding pattern until we figure out the timing.
Okay.
So let's talk a little bit about some alternative solutions. So recently we created something called Redis HLL. So Redis Hyperlog Log is basically a counter for you to increment unique page views. So you can think of the way in which you could track unique page views. Every time someone loads that metrics page or that dashboard, you would be storing in Redis their user ID and the page which they hit. So if you've got multiple pages and multiple users, you'd have the whole sort of table of all of the different user IDs and all of the different pages. The way which Redis HLL does it is they use an approximation method. So instead of storing multiple key values, they just store a single key value. And it's within, the error rate for this is 0.81. So over 99% accurate, which is really great. So we've actually started building out support for this counter. And I'll give you an example, or sorry, I'll paste in the MRs which we're currently working on so that your team can implement something like this.
And is it true that this is supported for both like our self-managed and our on-prem solution?
Yes, so both SaaS and self-managed. So the MRs which I'm pasting here is the issue. MR for counter interface. And then the second one. Okay, so I've pasted in 3 different issues and MRs. And if you look at those ones, that's actually where we're doing the work right now. So in terms of the work that we have, the first thing which we want to do is fully support this new type of counter, which is Redis HLL. We want to support this on the server side because that's where Redis is kept. So what that means is that the first thing we want to start with are server-side page view events and server-side API and Crud events. So the Crud events being create, read, update, delete. So anytime you interact with the database, really, we could track any of those events. So that could be anytime a user signs up or anytime a user updates a certain column in the database, or, you know, for instance, anytime someone edits a description, you would be able to track that specific update event.
This is something we can track today, right? But not like by unique users. That's what you're saying. Like we can track it today with usage ping, like updates to a database, but we cannot like say, okay, this was like unique users.
Yeah, what you can do today is you can look at the database table. Say you're looking at issues, for instance, right? The issues table has all of the different issues that are created, and it has a last updated column. So what you can do is you can sort it by the last updated date, and you can see how many issues were updated in the last month or so. But what it doesn't show you is the frequency of the updates because there's just a single timestamp. What this will allow you to do, any sort of counters and any sort of events, will allow you to see the specific snapshots every time an event happens. So if like 5 updates happen per issue, you'd be able to see those sort of insights. It's another level of granularity.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when it comes specific to what you're trying to do, a lot of the things which you're trying to do could be tracked on the server or on the client side. So on the server side, what you would do is there's 2 things which you're looking for. The first one is unique page views. So what you would do is you would tack on this Redis HLL counter anytime someone loads up that page. So that would be directly in the controller action. So I'll write that down. So in the controller action, which is basically where all of the API calls go, you would add Redis HLL counter. Now, if you only want the page views that come back with a result, what you would have to do is, as you are sending that page view data back over to the client side, you would do a quick check. Is this blank, or does this have certain attributes that I want?
Okay, I'm with you, sorry, yeah. So keep going.
Yeah, I'm just adding the nodes here. So that's how you would do it on the server side. You'd put it right directly in the controller action with the page views. Now on the client side, what you would do is you would implement it very similar to how you implement Snowplow right now.
Okay.
So what Snowplow does is every time the page loads within your browser, it fires off an event over to our Snowplow collector. So what you would have instead of that Snowplow.js tracker that's firing, you would have your own custom JavaScript that fires. And that custom JavaScript that fires would basically be hitting the GitLab application instead of a Snowplow collector elsewhere. So what we're going to do, and what that third issue that I linked to, which is the issue for API for front-end events, is basically taking that same counter interface that's on the server side and exposing it via an API. So if we have it exposed via an API, that means that any of your front-end events can hit that API, and then that API will increment that counter. So then you'd be able to tack on this, this event to increment that API onto anything in the front end.
And can I distinguish between the SaaS and the self-managed? Like,
yeah.
Or should I like instrument it like in two ways?
Yeah, so the instrumentation would be the same for SaaS and self-managed. The part where we find out whether it's coming from a GitLab SaaS or GitLab self-managed is later on. So after we've collected all of the events, our usage ping does their weekly job. And in that weekly job, we actually check what instance is this running on, and we pull the license information. So I'll show you exactly what we actually get from usage ping. So I'm on the docs.gitlab.com here, and then I'm going to go to usage ping guide, and then I'm going to go down to the example here. So you'll see in this example, this is exactly what we get back in usage ping, and it's got this license information, right? So GitLab's license has the GitLab information here, and our host name is gitlab.com. Our self-managed users will have, you know, whatever, wherever they host it at.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I think the last thing which I wanted to show you was the performance indicators slide deck, which we went over. I think this, just give me 1 second to find it. Here we go. So everything which I just mentioned is really captured in this slide here.
Yeah, I saw it on the recording.
Yeah, so what you're using right now is Snowplow.js and Ruby. Well, mostly Snowplow.js for the page view events and UI events. What we're opening up right now is the usage ping Redis, which has UI counters, page view counters, and Crud and API counters. So these ones, you've got the issues and MRs, which we're currently working on. What we can do is work directly with your team. So as we build this out, your team can take that and actually start implementing it.
Okay. And okay, so once it's get implemented, then it's like the whole work needs to be done in C-Sense. But that's another, it's this topic for another call or another guide that I need to read. But that's good enough for now. I mean, I guess the next thing I need to do is like ask my engineers to instrument that in this way, and then we'll take it from there. Last question. I mean, this Redis HLL counter, is this something that we will work on, like we'll keep working on, or this is like a one-time thing, like a workaround until we'll get like to the next phase? The reason I'm asking, because like all of this work is a work that my engineers need to do instead of features. And I really need to be mindful of their time. So I don't want them to spend like over and over, like iteration after iteration, like instrumenting another thing, because, you know, I can go on the things that I need to instrument, but I'm trying to be really mindful of their time.
Yeah, that's a really great question. We are working for having Snowplow on a self-managed instance right now. And I think that will give us the full functionality that all of our different PMs want. But there's a lot of scalability challenges when it comes to that. So the timing really depends on my team's ability to navigate those scalability challenges. I think I mentioned on the call right now, we're rate limited to 100 events per minute. We're trying to get to 20 million events per day. There's a big gap for us to bridge. So our recommendation is that we use this Redis HLL solution. I see this solution as being scalable right out of the box. And I think it'll give us the metrics which we need. So I wouldn't wait for the other solution because there's still a lot of technical risk there. We are trying our best to figure it out, but there is still risk that we don't figure that side out. And then we do have to just rely on this solution.
Okay, so can I start the implementation work, or should we wait until those issues will be closed and those MRs will get merged before?
I'd start having your engineers look at this. So have your engineers open up the issues. I'll loop in the engineer that's currently working on this so that they can work hand in hand. So my team's working on creating a generalizable counter interface that your team can then go and take. So it will be pretty close collaboration just due to the timing. Like I mentioned, we're working like a week or two ahead of your team just to put all of these pieces in place. So I think we'll have to work closely together.
Okay. And I mean, last question, once we'll get this in, how is the interface with systems? Is it like Snowplow? Is it like usage ping? Or is it like another way for me to do that?
It's all going to be documented within the usage ping guide. Yeah.
Cool. Thanks. We are up on time, and I think we cover like most of the things that I wanted. Unless you have any other questions.
Thank you for taking the time to speak with us. Please feel free to reach out if you have any other questions. As Jerome said, have the engineers get familiar with all the techniques that are possible, and then please have them provide feedback or ask any questions so that we can continue to improve our documentation and guides. And I want to say thank you so much for giving us the opportunity to learn more about your future as well.
Sure, thanks. Yeah, and I appreciate like the hard work, but it's super important for us to have this information in hand. So thanks.
No worries. We're looking forward to working closely with you and your engineers.
Cool. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Doug. Take care.